Another thing that you can do that's very practical at home is to give your children the freedom to repeat work.
Hmm.
This is something I would love to see parents encourage more. I think parents undervalue or kind of just don't see the repetition as being as valuable as participating in the lesson. And this is a
Yes.
bias we have, not as homeschoolers, but in our larger traditional world of education. People just don't see, they don't see the value in repeating.
Yeah, you're right. There's a really firm misconception. I think it goes way back when we think of like the Socratic method. What do we
Mhm.
imagine, right? This is the foundational teaching principle in Western thought, right? A person talking, right? We
Right.
imagine a lecture, or we imagine the sage on the stage is the old cliche, right? The teacher teaching, Mr. Whatever Holland's Opus guy or whatever.
Now,
Like we used to have there was a period when I was a kid, like, it seemed like we had a million movies about inspirational teachers
yes,
of one type or the other. And what do they all have in common? They had perfect discipline and
yep,
they super engaged their kids with their oratory.
that's
And
true.
that is not how learning works. Like really what you're aiming for in learning, adult learning, child learning, whatever, a little bit of new information and a whole lot of time to practice, apply, and creatively think through that new information. You're going to give them
Mhm.
a little bit of a nugget and then they're going to go to town, right? It's the little bitty seed that grows the great big tree.
I actually had a recent conversation with a homeschooler who said the Socratic method is really the only method you should use because it is the best and it's the most time tested. And I know that you love the
I do
Socratic
love the
method.
Socratic method.
You love it. But Maria Montessori disagreed with that approach. She said, actually, by using the Socratic method, especially with very young children, and
Yes,
we'll also say like you were a high school teacher when
yes,
and it was an effective method when you were teaching in the
sure.
classroom, not the only method that you used.
No,
But especially with little children, it doesn't work.
no, no. In fact, you want to talk less.
Yeah.
The younger they are, the less you want to
That's
say.
right. And so that repetition, back to that repetition, it is part of the learning process. It is very, very important that children repeat. So giving a lesson once is great. But did you know you can give the same lesson many times
Hmm.
in slightly different ways? And it's actually super, super healthy for children, super beneficial. It totally goes against everything we feel like we know about education. We think education is just this linear progress. And in fact, grade levels are set up like that.
Yep,
What is a school system approach to education? You start out at the beginning of the year,
yep.
you give these lessons during the 6 weeks. Next 6 weeks, you cover these things. Next 6 weeks, you cover these things. And by the end of the year, your children have had all of these lessons
Yeah.
cumulatively. They take a test and hopefully they do well on it because you have imparted all this knowledge through all of these
That's
lessons.
right.
On Montessori, we don't do that.
No, we
We
don't.
repeat things a lot. And we believe that by teaching that same concept in slightly different ways over longer stretches of time and encouraging our children to keep wrestling with that concept, they're going to get a stronger foundation in that knowledge area. And it
Hmm.
may not be testable at the end of the year. It might not.
Because you don't
Children,
know where they're gonna go.
you don't know where they're going to go, and you don't know what they're going to end up wanting to repeat. But that is something very significant, and it is not a freedom that is granted to most children in a traditional school setting. It's just not.
Yes,
We
totally.
just don't value it.
So it's like you have a magic plate that it has your carrots and your beans and your whatever, your delicious cornbread. Hmm. And they choose to eat a lot of carrots one day.
And you're like, okay, that you're done with carrots now.
No, no. The carrots keep coming. They keep coming if they want more carrots. Now you're going to change the plate out, right? This is where you are having that prepared environment where they have freedom of choice within limits. And so you're not going to give them the same exact plate every day. You're going to change it out so they get a balanced diet. But if they don't want to do anything but eat carrots, in our analogy, it's okay. So in an academic sense, if all they want to do is play with the pink tower,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Okay, let's think about beans. Let's pretend you got some pinto beans on that plate.
That would be
How
good.
boring would it be if like you gave them the pinto beans and said, "Well, you ate them, so you're good. We'll give you something. Try something else,
Yeah.
right? You can't do any more beans." But no, Marie Montessori says like, let's give them lima beans one day.
Yeah.
Let's give them cranberry beans. Let's give them black beans. Let's, there's still beans. But
Perfect.
we're
Perfect.
giving variety. And you see that in the whole math curriculum
That's
is
right.
exactly like that. We move from the golden beads to the stamp game. Guess what? You're teaching the same concept.
That's right.
You're not teaching anything different. You're still doing dynamic addition or, that early multiplication with single digit. Like you're still doing it, but it's with a slightly different material and it is encouraging the repetition. So again, like when we talk about repetition, we're not talking about just drilling on math facts until they're mastered and then, being done with them. We're talking about giving children the literal freedom that comes with repetition. And through repetition comes growth
And mastery.
and eventually mastery. But it might take a long time to get to that mastery. And the mastery isn't the point. It's the progress that's the point.
Yeah, that's right. We don't like to say mastery here because it's...
I don't like the word mastery.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, I think everybody knows what it means, but it is a word we would like to kind of erase because it implies a finality.
Yeah.
Like you've come to the end of the road, and we would actually say that you are never really you've never really fully mastered. You've only achieved levels of proficiency, and actually that's a much more exciting way to approach life. Like you may not need to go to the nth degree, like the level of proficiency you've achieved in, let's say, cooking beans, to go back to our beans analogy, may be good enough. You don't need to become like a 5-star chef.
We eat a lot of beans.
We do. But you could. And so the level of proficiency or your level of mastery should match to the level that is right for you. Yeah. Okay, now we had a comment. This is from, I think Sarah must be out there. Hello, our
Sarah?
member from the Great Northwest, I believe. I think what has helped me is watching your foundational lessons and reading the activities. Then I introduce things more fluid with our day.
Ah, beautiful.
Like we were waiting outside for his dad to finish, and there was a landscape rocks, and we started to order biggest to smallest. Excellent.
Perfect example.
That is an awesome example. Yes. Sensitivity to order. He was being expressed. You've given the lesson. You know, like what to look for. And you gave him the ability to go out and do it. So that's a freedom of choice. And then obviously repeating something that was taught earlier.
For sure.
In another environment. So that is great.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
The third thing we want to mention is the freedom to have independent work, to do that purposeful, independent work. Not that learning in a social context isn't also important. It becomes more important the older children get. But the freedom to follow your own path of learning is something that we don't often afford children in a traditional school system that we do in Montessori. Think about a traditional classroom. Everyone is supposed to be, I don't know if our friends know this out there, but the words are on task. Mm-hmm. Okay, teachers, I would love to know, modern teachers, if this is still the buzzword.
Task on time.
Are you
time on task?
Students on task, or are they not on task? And being on task is definitely the key to getting a good evaluation as a classroom.
Yeah, it's called time on task. You would like as a metric, and maybe they don't do that anymore. I mean, it's changed. We haven't been in a public school classroom in
We've been out of the classroom
many years now, but my sense is that even if
the words are different,
the melody is the same. Like I suspect that the words have changed, but the tune hasn't.
Being on task really just means doing what the teacher says you're supposed to be doing, learning on the same concept, doing the same thing that all the other students are doing in task. And being off task can be anything from being distracted. I mean, I'm guessing like teenagers on their phones these days is a big problem.
Yep.
So that could be a form of being off task. Could be like talking to your neighbor. I don't know. I was told that in school a lot too. I mean, I wasn't. I was very quiet.
I mean, it's just generally not doing.
But I heard it a lot. Like,
it's just generally not doing the thing you were told to do.
Yeah.
Right.
But I will tell you, like, So I wasn't the kid who was like misbehaving on purpose in class or clowning around. I don't know anybody who might be clowning around in class back in the day. But it wasn't me. And I wasn't like just sitting there just chatting with my friends. I was often like reading under my desk or doing, I was often off task, in school, which a lot of teachers were willing to let slide because I was so quiet,
Well,
and
and you
not
got your
disruptive.
work done, so you weren't a problem. I mean, in
That's
this,
right.
like, so now we're kind of getting into the deeper thing, like, what does time on task mean? It just means, did you do the thing I told you to
Mhm.
without something else? And if you weren't doing the thing I told you to do, were you causing a problem?
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of school that kind of is about that still.
Yeah, so we're shaking it up. We're saying in Montessori, like you actually don't have to be on task for what your teacher says you're supposed to be doing at that moment. You get to choose, you get to repeat, and you get to work at your own pace and independently on your own thing.
Yeah.
If you want to, I would also say like in Montessori environments, we often have the image that children are just sitting there working by themselves all the time, and that's not true. There's a lot of collaborative work that goes
Yeah,
on
so freedom to
too.
work independently does not mean no group work.
That's right. But it does mean that the adult is not leading every single activity and hovering over,
That's right.
micromanaging it. Children should be allowed to pursue their interests and go deeply into it and work on their own projects as much as possible. Some children are like extremely independent learners, and some children are more social learners and will require you as a homeschooling parent to be more present with them because they
Mhm.
just really like that kind of collaborative work. And that's fine. That's not what we mean by independent. What we really mean is that you are not dictating every single task that your child is supposed to be doing and enforcing it.
That's right.
You are allowing the learning process to unfold, allowing your child's inner guide to lead them to unexpected discoveries.
Yeah, you're hoping to unlock the work cycle, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
these, when we, let's tying it back a little bit to this idea of what does it mean to follow the child. Sorry, I was going to look at this real quick.
Oh,
So
okay.
the things that we've mentioned, the three things we've mentioned, which
Mhm.
are freedom of choice, freedom to within limits, freedom to repeat, and freedom to work independently. The reason that it's following the child isn't just letting the child go off and do whatever your child go off and do whatever. It's because these concepts, or sorry, the concept of following the child is woven within the very structure of how Montessori works. So when we
Right.
say freedom of choice within limits, we're talking about understanding the planes of development. We're
Right.
talking about the kinds of materials or lessons you would give based on the child's level of development, right? You talk about the freedom to repeat. What are you describing here? How you would prepare, you would give a short lesson, put the material out, and allow the child to go and repeat the lesson again and again. How you would focus on a fewer number of tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And freedom to work independently, like I said, this is the work cycle, right? You're wanting to give the child time to work independently, to feel that inner guide come forth, and then let that guide the work into a real deep way. And when we confine that, we talked about this in detail, I think, last week. When we start to confine that by a clock, that's you really will break that. So, because we don't necessarily know, we know that you want to set aside time for it, but when it happens, how like will it happen every day? What will spark it? How long will it last? This can vary, and so you want to give them that time to work independently so that you can create the best possible conditions. So following the child is woven within all of the concepts of what Montessori is about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're dedicating yourself to these principles. You are agreeing that following your child means giving your children choices. You're agreeing to allow them and encourage them and model for them that repetition. By following them, you're encouraging that independent work where the Spirit takes them. All right. And what does this require of you? It requires you to be a very good observer of your child. And to have a good working knowledge. And I think Sarah demonstrates this with her comment of the Montessori scope and sequence, so that when you are out in the world, you have an idea of the kinds of the structure of what a good Montessori lesson looks like, how to use your hands to
Mm.
show and not overly talk, how to gently guide your child towards something of interest and then observe
Mhm.
them and their reactions and adjust based on what they're doing. But like if you don't have that knowledge of the like where you're headed, the scope and sequence of like my child's basically we've leveled everything 1 to 6.
Mhm.
So if you know the kinds of lessons that are in level 1 of math,
Mhm.
and you're really familiar with them and you're looking at them often, as we encourage parents to do by using our Montessori planning cards,
Mhm.
which I've left upstairs, otherwise I would show you, then you can take that knowledge out into the real world and apply it over and over and over again. Okay. So you have to have that working knowledge. And we give parents that working knowledge through the materials that we
Mhm.
offer them, the lessons and activities guide, through the lesson explorer in our complete curriculum, that where parents can go and just type in a concept
Yep.
and see the lesson immediately.
Yeah, the
So
steps on how to
we
do it.
did that so that you can take you don't have to have your little lesson and activities guides with you to give lessons. We're hoping, and I think that we're starting to see parents use it like this, that you can go out into the wild, into the museum, or into onto the playground, out in the real world, at grandma's house, and you'll still have the scope and sequence and all of the lessons, all 3,000 lessons that we have
Yeah. Now
created in the lesson
I want to
explorer.
underline something here because I have seen the proliferation of AI is so fast. So
It
you might
is.
be, it's true, you can search for Montessori lesson or I don't know, ordering sensitivity to order on the internet. You have to tread lightly in a way that you
Or,
didn't 10
yeah,
years
tap
ago.
it into Chat GPT, as a lot of people are starting to
Yeah,
do.
so I'm not saying that because it doesn't have good information. I'm saying that it's come to my attention,
Yeah.
just even as a passive consumer of entertainment or others, that AI is really transforming the quality of information on the internet.
Hmm.
So it's actually we're coming into an age where having a reliable uh,
A
source, like a
definitive
definitive
source.
actual human source, will become pretty valuable.
Hmm.
So whether you're in our community or finding someone else, go find a human being to work with because it really is important. And it will help you know what to look for and then what to anticipate.
That's right.
Now, we had another comment I wanted
Yeah.
to toss in real. Sarah again says, I've observed Montessori class and I was impressed with children helping other children and even teaching each other. I felt a little insecure that when I play or give a lesson alongside, I'm acting more like a teacher.
Hmm.
I think that's a good, I don't know, how would you advise? Like, if you're trying to play with your child
Hmm.
with a lesson, how do you keep yourself from feeling like a teacher?
I think you have to just try on a lot of hats and see how your child responds. There's definitely like our children even can identify it. Like when we put on our teacher voice, sometimes our
Or
kids will
you're the one
also.
you're always like pointing it out to me, like,
I am.
oh, this is Dad's business voice. This is Dad's
Is it?
teacher voice.
It's the teacher voice. Yeah, I don't know. It's not like we developed a teacher voice only through the classroom use.
Sure.
I think that owning your instructor, like that part of you, that in
It's
kind of,
authoritative or something.
I don't know, that instructor kind of voice. My children could start to identify it in me when they were very, very little. I think even when our youngest was like 3 or 4, he could start noticing like when mom shifts into like Montessori guide mode versus just mom. And what happened, I'll tell you what happened, is this ended up just being a kind of modeling for us.
It's
And
true.
what we noticed in our kids is that by watching us, sometimes assume that guide voice or that teacher persona, they learned how to put it on themselves. And so by the time they were like 6 or 7 years old, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, that's when children really start. And I don't know if you've noticed this with your kids, Sarah, but that's often when parents will notice that their child starts wanting to teach other
Oh,
people
yes.
lessons,
Yeah.
or things about the world. They'll
Talk
have
about those
like
Barbies again. Yeah.
knowledge bombs,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's really surprising. It's developmental, but it's also kind of surprising. And I was also just like in awe, uh, during those moments when our children like assumed that role, that kind of, I mean, I don't want to say like authoritative, but like that confident, excited to engage, impart knowledge type of persona with other people. And it often happens like spontaneously. You're
Yeah.
out in the park or something, and another adult is, I don't know, getting a drink from the water fountain. Your child comes up and it's like, "Did you know that?" And you're like, talking to a stranger randomly. Like, what's happening here? And if it's a nice stranger, they look up and they're like pleasantly amused at your adorable child who's informing them of something. And what I know now is like this is actually a developmental thing that does shift and does happen. And so I don't think using that teacher voice or having that persona is a bad thing. So but play with it and understand that sometimes your child will want the teacher voice and sometimes they won't. So if you notice that they're not responding to you as well because they feel like you're not being your authentic
That's
self
right.
with them, they will let you know through their behavior. They'll be a little more skeptical of like, who are
Yeah.
you?
I don't,
Like,
right.
I don't
I didn't
trust
come here to be
this.
sold something.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
are you trying to manipulate me into something? I don't want to be manipulated. They'll kind of get that and you'll be like, oh, was I too teachery? And so next time you like let it go. And then next time you'll come in with a softer opener. So I think it's just part of the learning process.
Yeah.
Just embrace it.
And the other thing I would add on this, because I think it's implicit to the question, is about friends,
Hmm.
right? And who the playmates are. You talked about your playing and teaching your child, and then you saw in the classroom like group work or homeschooling can be lonely, but in our experience, it doesn't have to be.
Mm.
So go seek out, even if you can't find a homeschool group, find an after school group, a play group, sports, karate, an art school,
We
art
put our kids in a lot of things.
pottery class, whatever might be available,
Yeah.
wilderness, the scouting, whatever might be available for you. I was in 4-H. It was an awesome program. I loved it.
Hmm.
Um, Depending on the age of your child, getting them involved in something, you don't have to worry about them not being in a class with lots of kids all the time. You just want to give them social time with others. And like Aubrey said, you don't have to worry about putting on the teacher. Teaching and learning are also natural. What we
Hmm.
don't like is to be manipulated. So
Right.
when you're genuine, it's fine. Like now, when they get to be teenagers, then they'll roll their eyes because
They
everything you
all
say
do.
is like,
Yeah.
"Ugh, you again."
It really is. It doesn't seem like it matters
But I think
what
you've got a
comes
ways to go
out.
with you,
Doesn't
Sarah.
matter what comes out of my mouth anymore.
And so, but and to go back with following the child, follow your child's lead on wanting social time. They'll show you. It was very clear for us. Our two sons are very different in terms of being introverted or extroverted. It was super clear how much socialization, social time each of them wanted.
Hmm.
And for the one who was more shy, it was our responsibility to make sure
To
that they
ensure
had.
it.
And
Right.
for our others, it was our responsibility to make sure that he had enough
Hmm.
because we were trying to follow. And that's an example of following your child, right? Like we gave them freedom within limits. Like you have to have some socialization time and we want to make sure that you have all that you need.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Final thoughts on observation. What are we? Sorry.
Okay. Final thoughts is that this tension between freedom and boundaries is nothing that is ever going to be 100% solved, especially because children are growing and developing and their needs change and the curriculum and changes as they get older or as they develop more skills. And so try not to worry too much. We've given you a lot to think about in terms of actionable things that you can hold yourself to in following your child. But don't try to always hit that perfect balance every single time, or to feel bad if you're not. Because homeschooling, all of teaching, whether you're in a classroom or whether you're at home, it's just ebb and flow and push and pull. And maybe I like to think of it as like, it's like the metronome that like hits the balance, like, but you only hit the balance like once. And most of the time you're either on this side or this side, right? And like, oop, balance. Okay. Balance. Right. And so
more often you hit it, the faster it's going.
that's right.
Sometimes it's better to be a little
slower with the ebb. Yeah. So following your child is deeply intentional. There's a lot to it. There's so much more that we could talk about, and we could do a whole more episodes on this thing. Fortunately, we have started a new series, and this is the first in this little series, helping you to kind of get through these very common hurdles that Montessori parents go through when they're exploring Montessori homeschooling for the first time. There are lots of little hiccups. Next time, we're going to be talking about the difference between Montessori and like the kind of box curriculum that you might get with a traditional homeschooling curriculum, all-in-one curriculum offering. To know that like you can always come to Child of the Redwoods and depend on us for like authentic, genuine Montessori information. And if this is interesting to you and you'd like to go deeper with us and kind of explore these topics some more,
head over to our website,
yeah.
childoftheredwoods.com.
And there are lots of fun ways you can engage. You can take a trial of our curriculum. And I also would recommend that you start with a little quiz that we have on our website right now to help you find that perfect rhythm.
Find your perfect Montessori self. What will you be? I wonder.